All right, guys, Amendment 12, 1804. Many years after. So, no, it's actually only a couple years. Sorry about that. So, 1795. So, 9 years later, in 1804, we have Amendment number 12, written in 1804. It's pretty long. The electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president, one of whom at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves. They shall name in their ballots the person voted for as president, and in distinct ballots the person voted for as vice president, and they shall make distinct lists of all persons voted for as president, and of all persons voted for as vice president, and of the number of votes for each, which lists they shall sign and certify, and transmit, sealed to the seat of the government of the United States, directed to the President of the Senate. The President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives, open all the certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. The person having the greatest number of votes for president shall be the president, if such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed, and if no person have such majority, then from the persons having the highest numbers not exceeding 3 on the list of those voted for as president, the House of Representatives shall choose immediately by ballot the president. But in choosing the president, the votes shall be taken by states, the representation from each state having 1 vote. A quorum for this purpose shall consist of a member or members from 2/3 of the states, and a majority of all the states shall be necessary to a choice. And if the House of Representatives shall not choose a president whenever the right of choice shall devolve upon them before the 4th day of March next following, then the vice president shall act as president, as in the case of the death or other constitutional disability of the president. The person having the greatest number of votes as vice president shall be the vice president, if such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed, and if no person have a majority, then from the 2 highest numbers on the list, the Senate shall choose the vice president. A quorum for the purpose shall consist of 2/3 of the whole number of senators, and a majority of the whole number shall be necessary to a choice, but no person constitutionally ineligible to the office of president shall be eligible to that of vice president of the United States. I feel like somewhere here they're talking about the Electoral College. I could be wrong. Here's the interpretation or the note. When the framers of the Constitution devised the complicated process by which presidential electors would select the nation's president and vice president, they assumed that those electors would run for their offices as individuals and that the voters would select them on the basis of their individual merits. And that original notion of the way the electoral system would work, it was expected that the electors would each cast 2 ballots with no distinction between a presidential and a vice presidential ballot, and that the person receiving the greatest number of votes would be elected president and the person receiving the next largest number of votes vice president. The framers of the Constitution did not anticipate the emergence of an organized political party system in which 2 extra constitutional political parties, the Federalists and Jeffersonian Republicans, would organize electors, or in some states, slates of electors, pledged in advance to vote for presidential and vice presidential candidates as part of a party ticket. In the election of 1800, the party ticket of Thomas Jefferson, the person whom the Republicans intended as their presidential candidate, and Aaron Burr, the person whom the Republicans intended as their vice presidential candidate, received a majority of electoral votes. So he said he didn't realize that they would have kind of like make it a tandem, like, you know. Um, in fact, though party discipline was so great that the electors cast their votes on their 2 ballots in such a way that Jefferson and Burr had an equal number of votes, with no constitutional mechanism for deciding which of the candidates was intended to be the presidential candidate and which the vice presidential candidate. Okay, let me read that again. With no constitutional mechanism for deciding which of the candidates was intended to be the presidential candidate and which the vice presidential candidate. As a consequence, the election was thrown into the House of Representatives, where after a great deal of intrigue, Jefferson was elected as president and Burr the vice president. The adoption of the 12th Amendment was a necessary adjustment to the way in which the American party system had transformed America's presidential elections. Although the provisions of the 12th Amendment are as mind-numbing complicated as the original provisions of Article 2, Section 1. The essential feature of the amendment was that henceforth, electors would vote separately for the president and vice president. And while the original language in Article 2, Section 1 stipulated that the House of Representatives would choose among the 5 leading candidates should no one receive a majority of electoral votes, the new provision in the 12th Amendment narrowed the choice to the top 3 candidates. It is hard to read.